This is a Q&A session on technique and articulation. So thanks to all my Patreon followers who submitted questions. I had like an open-ended Q&A session, and there were so many questions from my Patreon followers that I did 3 different videos, and this is part 3 of 3. So all of these questions are related to technique and articulation. If you're interested in supporting the videos, the channel, or the website, there's a link in the description for the support page, so you can check that out if you like. So, like I said, all these questions kind of relate to technique, so we're just going to dive right in. The first question is by Colin. He says, I struggle to find my ideal sitting position. I started off with a guitar support, but grew from that to the ergo play, which I find much better for my overall guitar position with much less playing fatigue. So my question is, do you have a quick technique that you use to relax or fit into your own playing position? By the way, I've always used a collapsible keyboard bench seat. Is that ideal, or is that perhaps not ideal? So great question. And a very relevant question because, you know, especially busy musicians, they're always running around town doing rehearsals. They're sitting on different chairs all the time. If you're performing, you just have to sit on, you know, what's on the stage. You don't always get the perfect or the same bench to sit on. So that's all very relevant that, you know, it can be tricky. Also, as, you know, just in general, students find it hard to find an ideal sitting position. So I have a couple of things to say to that. The first thing I would say is that have a short technique warm-up, like 5 minutes long, that goes over a variety of techniques like scales, arpeggios, slurs, bar, stretch, and see if your guitar position is working for all those techniques. You know, especially when you've been away from the guitar a little bit, you know, I like to sit down and just wiggle my way back into the guitar. You know, I'll do some technique and I'll move my neck around and just kind of like move and make sure that it all feels right and feels comfortable. And then if you have those variety of techniques, you can also just make sure that like the guitar is high enough for stretches, because that really helps with stretches. And then you can make small adjustments through when you're playing those techniques, you know, moving the suction cup to the ergo play a little bit this way or a little bit this way, adjusting it so it's higher or lower. All those things make a big a real big difference. And you know, the other thing is that, like, I think people that have played a long time and played other styles are used to kind of a little bit of variation in their sitting position. Like if I'm sitting around playing pop music, I don't sit in the classical position. I sit like a, you know, regular guitarist with it on the other leg. Or a lot of the time I'm playing my little guitar-lele just because it's easy to hold for like casual, like sitting around the home and playing pop stuff. So, you know, like not being too picky about it in certain situations gives you some flexibility with that. But in a more formal setting, like here, I always have the same chair, my music stand, the ergo play, or a footstool. And, you know, I can be very consistent and find the perfect sitting position. It's not always going to be like that, but luckily, especially with guitar supports, I think small adjustments are possible. I know people don't like to undo their adjustment because it's perfect for at home, but if you got to do it, you got to do it. And, you know, you get more used to it as you go. So I hope that kind of answers the question. That's my recommendation for sure, is making sure that all the techniques you need in guitar playing work with your current sitting position. And you'll find as you age and as you get better at guitar, you'll make small adjustments to your position anyway. So there's no fixed thing that you'll stick with. I sometimes think I've found the perfect sitting position, but then I make small adjustments to it. In regards to your adjustable keyboard bench, as long as it's adjustable, I know you said collapsible, but as long as it's adjustable, then that's good. I mean, finding a sitting position where your legs aren't bent too much and things like that is really helpful. So when I'm shooting my videos here at home, I have like a drummer's throne, and I like it because it has a padded round edge to it. And your legs on guitar playing aren't always at the same angle, so I don't like square chairs. I actually played on them for like 25 years. It's totally fine. Don't worry about it. But I do like this when it in the ideal situation. It creaks a little bit, which is annoying for my videos. But But I find that really helpful. Okay, the next question is by Edwin. I'm working on the 100 open string exercises in your technique book. You recommend playing them with both free stroke and rest stroke. I find that I can play free stroke faster than rest strokes. Is it better to adjust my speed or to keep the same speed, possibly using a metronome? So good question. And that, those rest strokes, they mainly apply to like the melodic exercises rather than the arpeggios, although I do make recommendations for some of the arpeggio patterns, which you'll find. There's no reason to hold back one technique. Like if your free strokes are faster, then just keep track, like use the metronome, but keep track of your metronome speeds. And if you're trying to increase your speed, like just have a separate column where you write down the metronome marking for free stroke or rest stroke. There's no reason to hold one back because the other one is deficient. However, I usually, if I find a deficiency in my playing something like that, which isn't common to all guitar players, then I definitely dedicate more time to the thing that is deficient. So I would just dedicate maybe a little bit more time to rest stroke practice in certain situations. Not all of your practice session, but in those open string exercises, you could dedicate some extra time to rest stroke, making sure it's a rest stroke that's nice and relaxed and light. Don't consider your rest stroke so much heavier than your free stroke. You can practice that by playing free stroke and switching to rest stroke and seeing if you can keep a very similar hand position and volume and things like that. So you don't want you want to investigate the issue, but also just dedicate more time to rest strokes, and you can separate them. Sometimes I'll do evening things where I'll keep speeds at the same level, but it's kind of a shame sometimes because you don't want to hold yourself back in other areas. Just kind of adjust the amount of time that you dedicate to something. Same thing if I have a student who has an issue with slurs but not scales, I usually have them play more slur exercises, and we just dedicate more time to that to even them out overall. I don't hold them back though, and stop them from playing scales. It's just about really making sure you focus on improvements. Okay, Carl Joseph asks, do you have any suggestion on how to speed up tremolo, triplets, or arpeggios? I just don't manage to get my fingers working faster up to even and smooth free strokes. So speed is always an interesting question. The first part of my answer is just that speed is the result of precision and relaxation. So a precise player and a relaxed player will be able to play faster. Because usually the two issues that come up when you do try to play faster is you start tensing up and you start hitting wrong strings and stuff like that. So, you want speed to be the natural result of accuracy and relaxation. So those are the things you need to work on in order to pick up your speeds. And you can track that with a metronome by just working on, relaxing as a conscious thing. I have other videos on the website about relaxation and about speed, so you can check those out. But that's the conceptual part of my answer to your question, is to let speed naturally occur because of those factors. Now, the other part of my answer is that sometimes in certain techniques, for example, tremolo, there could be some other issue, that's the cause. So there's tons of variables here. It could be hand position, guitar position. It could be relaxation. It could be accuracy. It could just be certain deficiencies within the hand. So for myself, I'm working on the big Barrios tremolo piece right now, which I'm going to publish and everything and put a video out for. And the thing for me that helps me the most is just simply practicing MA scale work, like on open strings even. Practicing speed and scale work with just these two fingers, actually, and also just playing more scales with those fingers, actually helps my tremolo even out a ton. Because it's a tough thing to discover, but I discovered that the inefficiency of these two fingers it causes problems with tremolo because these two fingers are just so efficient. So by working these two more, I feel that I've really evened out my tremolo, and I've also learned to relax more in these fingers because of all the exercises I've been doing with just these two fingers. And that has bled into my tremolo and arpeggios as well to make them smoother and faster. So, and there could be tons of variables here for different students because all students have different strengths and different weaknesses in their playing. So my suggestion to you is don't think of speed in relation to specific techniques like tremolo, because the problem could lie elsewhere. And not the problem, but like I said, the natural result of getting faster is all these other things. And that's why when you study with a good teacher, they have you study a pretty well-balanced technique routine, because practicing your scales might help your arpeggios become more efficient, and practicing your arpeggios might help your scales become more efficient. There's all this cross-contamination between techniques, which simply just the end result is that you have a solid technique foundation and a relaxed technique and a good technique, and speed is a result of that. So complicated, right? Because I can't answer your question super specifically. I can only give you a conceptual answer as a teacher. If you go online, you'll see lots of videos where people promise speed as a result of this particular exercise or that one. That can help. Speed exercises can help. But really, the conceptual answer is much more important because it's a long-term thing and it's also related to your overall playing. Great question, though. I wish I could give you a more specific answer. Eddie asks, I would like to ask about how to make a steady sound when picking, or plucking, we usually say. Because sometimes the right-hand fingers lose control of the plucking power. Yeah, right-hand balance is a huge topic, Eddie, and we deal with it all the time when we're bringing out a melody. Making sure that melody note pops out of the texture while the other notes remain softer. So in terms of a steady sound, I think the first thing that I usually do with students is have them do exercises where they practice bringing out different fingers. So if we have an arpeggio like this, I'll have them first start by bringing out the thumb. And that's a combination of playing stronger with the thumb, but softer with the fingers as well, because it's all relative, right? Then we switch to the I finger. Most of the time, if a student just thinks of a deeper follow-through towards the palm with that finger, they'll get a louder sound, but soften up the other fingers as well. I. Then we'll switch to the M. Then the A. And we'll do lots of exercises like that in order to make sure that our hand is balanced in a certain way and also capable of bringing certain notes out more. Other suggestions might be to mix rest strokes and free strokes, like you could do rest stroke with I, free stroke with M. And by practicing a deeper follow through with one finger, again, gives you just more control over the hand. Later on, with a well-balanced technique, you won't have to micromanage it or think about it too much. It's something that you'll just have. You'll have balance in the hand. Kind of relates to the previous question, though, is that your overall technique is like an overall picture of your playing, and it has to be balanced overall, not just this one specific exercise, but by practicing a wide variety of exercises, you end up with a balanced right hand. But those are some possible ways. Ellie asks, a lesson on rests the different ways of playing them and which is appropriate in which situation would be a real help. Huge topic, Ellie, and probably I can't really give a full lesson on it in this Q&A session. It would just take up too much time. But I think that, playing rests, what you really mean is probably muting techniques. So like when we're playing some notes, how do we mute all the sound? And there's really just two ways that we do that. We do it either with the right hand by putting our finger back on the string, or if it's a chord, sometimes if it's at the end of the piece, our whole hand. Or sometimes it's in the left hand, But there's always some residual sound there. There's other issues too, like if you're playing a scale backwards, a descending scale, and an open string occurs, that open string keeps ringing, and you'll notice pros sometimes, will use a weird technique to mute it out. Having an overall lesson on it is fine. Usually the way we approach this is very gradually. So in like my graded books, I think it's in grade 2, the first muting of rests occurs in the right hand, and most of the time it's the thumb on a certain, note after playing. Where the thumb goes back on the string. And you just kind of, piece by piece and situation by situation, you start to gain a handle over how to mute certain things. And it usually starts with muting of bass strings or residual strings, like muting out a string that's sounding by putting our right hand, usually thumb or fingers, back on the string. And then later on, certain left hand techniques, simply lifting your finger off the string, lifting your finger off the fret. So releasing the pressure, but keeping your finger on the string stops the sound. So that's if you're playing like you can mute things like that. That's usually the next step, and then there's the highly finicky like muting of specific notes with weird techniques, or like a bar that doesn't get played but mutes out a whole bunch of notes, where I mute out the other notes, which is a weird technique and not for beginners. A lot of classical guitar music doesn't need muting, or at least not very much, except at maybe the ends of phrases or ends of the piece. So it's a gradual thing that we learn. So yeah, I would start with right hand muting and then move on to left hand muting, and each situation will be different, and it's a long process. A little bit beyond the scope of today's lesson, but maybe I'll consider making like a series of videos to tackle it, because I think it would be like a 3-part series, but I'll definitely keep that in mind as a topic. Okay, the last question is by Brett, and Brett asks, apart from Raschiato, I haven't noticed explicit reference to the right hand pinky finger in method books or suggested right hand fingerings. It seems like a bit of a wasted resource. I have started to use it where I see 5-note chords, Giuliani arpeggios. Do other people do this too? Or should I abandon it and concentrate on perfecting the thumb rest stroke while plucking the higher notes with IMA? He's referring to like when we play a 6-note chord, we can use our thumb to play all 3 like lower notes, for example, which some people have a hard time because maybe their thumbnail catches, or they're not used to rest strokes in the thumb. Or should I perfect both, he's asking. So the main answer to your question is that the pinky finger is not needed very often. It's usually a very much something that would only be used in very rare occurrences. Therefore, people don't usually dedicate much time to perfecting it. There have been lots of people who do dedicate a bunch of time to it, but I'm not sure how effective or successful they've been. It also tends to be significantly shorter than the other fingers. I mean, all of these fingers are different lengths, and that does cause some issues in guitar playing, but we learn to deal with it. But this one does tend to be significantly shorter. For me personally, like when I play electric guitar with a pick, that reduces my number of fingers. So I tend to use an electric guitar a little bit. I also don't need much pressure on electric guitar. If I'm amplified, I can pluck with that finger and the sound will come out quite easily. So I'll use it in that. On rare occasions in classical guitar, I will use it just because it's like a delicate texture and there's so much weird string spacings that I end up needing it, but that's extremely rare. I would say most of the time, I use the thumb technique to hit multiple strings with the thumb. Or if the occurrence happens where it's like P-I-M here, the A finger can hit two strings just as effectively as the thumb can sweep. So most of the time, or even the I finger, any of the fingers really, maybe I'm muting these ones and I need to play the inner notes with the thumb. You can play two notes with the I finger too. So yeah, but it's an interesting topic. There's so much to do and so little time, and students have so much to work on that dedicating time to the pinky finger is not on the top of my mind for sure. I wouldn't turn people away from it, but I certainly don't think it's necessary for things like the Giuliani arpeggios. I think you should just use regular techniques for the majority of the time. That said, if you can play it with the pinky finger and get a good sound, and you think it's working for you, I don't think we should turn our back on those ideas. Let's not be closed-minded about it. But I just think that when you watch professionals play, there's a reason why they just don't use it very often, and they have become very efficient at the other more traditional ways of playing. And maybe that's partly for ergonomics, reasons of ergonomics. Maybe it's just the tradition of technique practice. Maybe it has to do with just, strength isn't really needed in classical guitar, so I don't want to use the word strength, but something about the ergonomics plus the way that we play guitars just doesn't seem to suit that finger as well. It ends up hooking kind of. So, yep, that's my long-winded answer on that one. Is that I don't want to tell you to turn your back on it, but I would certainly focus on the other playing techniques, because in the majority of guitar music, whoever composed it usually, for most of the time, plays guitar, and it's very playable without it. In other special circumstances, especially modern music or music not written by guitarists, sometimes, it might be needed. Or you can get around it by using a different technique, depending on the musical texture. I would say when I do use it, it's usually in a softer texture and where it's like super delicate, and I just want all the notes plucked perfectly, like that, rather than like sweeping a finger over it. Whether I could actually tell, I'm not sure. It depends on how delicate your sweep is with your thumb. You can do it pretty lightly if you try. So yeah, I don't really have an answer for you, I guess. But I certainly don't train my students to use the pinky finger. It's just used as an auxiliary factor in very special circumstances. But very interesting question, and I'm sure many people and teachers will have their own opinions on that one for sure. But as you mentioned, most technique books and methods don't promote it. Thanks to everyone who asked questions, and I hope to do more Q&As in the future. If you feel like joining us, you can check out my Patreon.